All right. Hello, hi, Laura. Hi, Kara. I can see you. Say hi. All right, so Mr. Charles is here, so I think we should get going. Well, I'll say this when he's in the room. Okay. Hello, Mr. Charles. Oh, wait. Hello, Mr. Charles, how are you? Oh, you're on mute. Yeah.
Well, thank you, and you.
Nice to see you. Good, long time no see.
All right.
Yep. I was going to say, and I started saying, and I said I should say this with you in the room. I had a nice afternoon with you, touring the school and meeting with teachers and students and Dr. Galdston and a couple of parents who came after school. So that was nice. So the way we are going to do this tonight is I will, you can have a few minutes to sort of introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, why you want to come to Watertown, a few minutes of that. And then I'm going to open it up to parents and caregivers or everyone in the Zoom besides me to ask questions of you. And if no one has questions, I have certainly prompts, but I heard a lot from you today, which has been great. So I just wanted to give everyone else a chance to ask questions. So you can take it away with it. And I just want to be transparent, this is being recorded because there's a lot of people who wouldn't be able to make it, who do want to see it. So I hope that's okay. It's being recorded.
Yeah, that is. I heard you did say that.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. So welcome to everyone, to parents, caregivers, teachers, and Mr. Charles, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to talk to you this evening. This is actually very exciting. I visited Watertown Middle School and I had such a pleasant experience. And primarily just seeing the kids in the hall, talking and interacting with them, and also seeing how they interacted with the teachers, how comfortable they are at the school. I really had a wonderful time, just a great environment. So I'll tell you a little bit about me. Actually was born and raised in Haiti, came here at the age of 18, went to school in Brooklyn, New York, learned English at that time. I've been in the United States since. I did my studies here. I went to Alfred University. I then went to Columbia University, then Framingham State College here in Massachusetts. I really have loved my experience in education. As I've said earlier, I feel as though education is following me. It's something that I was meant to do. The initial intent that my parent had in mind was for me to go to medical school and become a doctor. Mine was different. I wanted to become a science teacher and a math teacher. And here I am today as a school administrator. I've taught math, I've taught science. I love teaching. I love education. And I'll tell you this right now. I walk the streets of Boston and I meet kids and they talk to me about the experiences that we've had together. When I talk to them or something that they learned from my class, sometimes they make me feel so emotional about the things that they share. So I'm here right now and hopefully that I'll begin a journey with you and a journey that would be filled with so much emotion and love and so on and so forth. With this, I'm going to stop right here and wait to hear from you, or if you'd like me to elaborate on anything else or any questions that you may have.
Okay, so I don't know if anyone wants to raise their hand, or sometimes if we just yell out in Zoom, it's much, but does anybody have a question, or would anybody like Mr. Charles? Oh, I see Laura Daly, go ahead. You're first.
Hi, thank you for meeting with parents. I'm wondering how you balance the responsibilities of a vice principal to, keep everyone in line and enforce the rules with also building positive school culture. Like, how do you balance those two, hats of this job?
Yeah, I think those two things go hand in hand, actually. And I think that one is not independent of the other. I think maintaining a positive environment is giving kids the opportunity to feel a place where they are happy. And will kids have issues? Yes, of course, because they are teenagers. Will they make mistakes? Yes, but it's how we approach them. I no longer, and I was, and I'm going to tell you, one of the believers of kids have to be punished. for the deeds that they do. I don't think that really works. It may work temporarily, but I think kids have to be taught the right things to do. And when they make mistakes, giving them an opportunity to fix it is the first thing that comes to me in mind. Is there a time where we may be really literally feel forced to suspend a kid out of school? That may be, but it really is not. It's something that is like the last resort. Can kids learn about their behavior? Of course, and this is what I always look forward to is like, how do you teach that? How do I maintain a safe environment and a conducive learning environment? Sometimes I may have to remove a child from a classroom setting, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be a consequence that necessarily requires them to be out of school for a lengthy period of time. It's about how do I teach him or her to reintegrate the environment in a better way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question? I asked a lot of questions today already. Go ahead, Kelly.
I'd like to ask a question. So to your point, Mr. Charles, I'm Kelly Spillane. I'm the literacy coach at the middle school. So it's nice to meet you. I didn't get to meet you this afternoon when you were at the school. But to your point of, sometimes you have to remove a student. Once that might happen, a few times, or you have to make a decision about a student, our goal is to keep students in class. And of course, that would be your goal as well. But what kind of strategies or what have you encountered in the past where maybe that's been a difficulty, at the school, or maybe it was an institutional thing, not something that was directly your decision, but how would you solve that problem when you've got a repeated offender to prevent, a separate program from inflating, the population, and how do you keep those students engaged and in the classroom?
And it's sometimes being creative about, what are the solutions? The same thing doesn't work every time. So if we try something once and it doesn't work, okay, what other things do we try? Why is this not working? So maybe reaching out to different individuals within the schools to do different things, or finding out, is there a place where that student does well? What works here? Why doesn't it work over there? And try to figure out the way to make this work. But I found that most of the time, if you figure out the proper way to communicate with a child, you can turn things around. And also, half of the time when the kids, and you being a literacy person probably knows that, half of the time, if a kid cannot do something, if they can't read, it builds frustration. How do we address this issue? Put them in a place where they feel that they're going to be successful, then it is going to happen. And sometimes it could be that maybe you take a child for a longer time also out of a classroom, but not without them still having their testing. It could be a temporary change so that they could make some adjustment and then go back again. And I think it always goes back to, okay, how do I get you back in there? How do I get you to understand how the environment works? Or what are the rules that work for you? And also sometimes asking the child, how would you like this to work? What would you like differently? And sometimes they would tell you what are the things that would make it work for them. And I think it's just looking at so many different things and being creative about it. There is not one answer, one solution, but looking at so many different avenues and possibilities just to see what works for that particular individual.
Thank you.
Kara, you want to go ahead?
Hi, I'm Kara Lopez. I'm a WMS parent. My little guy, Joaquin, I don't know if you got to meet him today, but he's over there having fun. So my question is really from the parent perspective. If you were to join us at WMS, how would you kind of onboard with families and get to know the community and engage with us?
I'll probably initially maybe sending something out, maybe a letter, getting to know you, saying hello, how's everybody doing? And then maybe at some point in time, like a meeting event, just to talk with different people about how am I going to fit into the school, and then and support the goal and mission of the school. I think that would be very nice. And also getting to know your kiddos, meeting them on the first day, I love talking to children. All the time I ask some little questions, and sometimes I can get silly just to get their attention. just to get them to talk to me and get to know how they feel. So initially at the very start of the school year, I would try to engage with them, getting to know their name, what are the things they like, what are the things they do. And sometimes that's what helps me remember who they are. You know, how was your summer? What is something that you do? Just remembering that event and remembering the name and starting creating relationship with them, sitting in the cafeteria with them at times when time permits, and also getting to know them, eating with them, a variety of things. And then, of course, joining parents in meetings and different events. Just continually, I know it's not going to happen right away. I'll get to know a few parents and number of parents at the very start, but it's continually trying to establish this relationship and with parents and getting to know them. And also, hopefully, parents being part of the school committee and other things at the school, also getting to know them around this event, these types of events. Or maybe, like, for instance, let's say the art teacher inviting a parent to come and do some artwork or present something. All sorts of things like this to get parents to be a part of the school, to come to the school and to interact with the school and to get to know as many people as possible.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Anybody? I have a question in the chat, unless somebody else has a question.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Diego.
Hi, thank you for taking the time. This has been a very atypical year on so many fronts, or at least I hope we all agree it's been atypical. So I was curious, like, what have you learned in this year where it's presented opportunities it forced us to try different things, challenged with different problems. So, try new solutions. So what have you learned in this year?
Yeah, that is a fascinating question. You know what's interesting? We want students to stay, to not be too much in front of computers, but we found out that there are some of the learners that actually do very well with this. And for them, this is an advantage. So it might be something that we use more. I remember when I started school in the mid-90s, I was envisioning that in the future, every student will be on a computer. That was my vision. And it still hasn't happened. And we know there are some, detriments to being in front of a screen all the time, but there are some advantages for some kids who prefer to go at their own pace. So there are a number of things there. But also on the other end, knowing that kids have been in solitude for the longest time, being at home, not interacting. So they've lost in terms of peer interaction and understanding relationships. So it's something that they're going to need to rebuild next year. And of course, I know this is something that in the SEL front that we're going to need to do some work to make sure that kids, again, figure out, how do I interact with my peers? One of my Broncos, some of them haven't done that for a while. And for some of them, they've really shied away from interacting with anybody. And I've seen that with some kids returning to school and just want to be by themselves. So it will take some time, and it will also take some support. It will also take finding out members of the team that could help these students re-engage with their peers at a social level. Just some examples of what you were talking about, but that is a very good point, certainly.
Thank you.
All right, I'll read the question from the chat. Can you tell us about your approach for collaborating with your school principal? How do you envision collaborating with Ms. Martin and other staff within WPS?
Yes. Oh, that is great. I love this question. Well, I would see this like as very much an everyday thing, to bringing ideas and thinking out loud about things. I think if anything comes to mind, I would share it with Ms. Martin and say, this is what I think. What are your thoughts? And share that way. And we can talk about things, and then and I can explain my why and my reasoning behind it. And I think the same would apply for teachers too. I love having conversation with teachers, especially in passing. I'm doing PD time, walking by a room, and then saying, "Hey, how are you doing?" And then sometimes a conversation can ensue that would actually lead to something really good, or something I wanted to share and say. I love that, and I think it can begin a collaboration. And I think once we talk about something, we can make a plan for it. Again, we can actually aim and go for it. Once I'm in and I'm all in, it might not be my thought, but once I agree to do it, I'm all in. I will be totally in support of the idea, because it's something that we decide together. We got to go for it, and if it's going to be successful, we have to all put our support behind it. So yeah, I'm open to new ideas and to hearing people, to hearing different things. And I may not agree with something right away, and I may ask, let me process this a little bit. Let me think about it, and then coming back to you and then talking again. So it's always, keeping track of those things and then giving opportunity to get back. I'm hoping also there are times where there will be team meetings that I would be a part of, and then I would sit and hear the plans, the thoughts, and also sharing my ideas, and also hearing what parents would want to share. What are the things that they would like to do? What are the things that they see for the school? Maybe we can get these students to go watch this play. And then so something like that. And I can say, well, let's talk to this teacher about this, and let's see how we can make this play a learning opportunity for the kids. Maybe the ELA teacher can take it on, and then we could do something with a play. Maybe figure out how that could fit into the curriculum, and then making a lesson out of it, this thing like this. Different things like that. And also keeping in mind that teachers have a lot also, and there are certain things sometimes you can do, and how do we do it without it taking so much away or adding so much to their plate. But finding the right balance.
All right, thank you. Lily, do you want to take the next question?
Yes, thank you. Hello, it was nice to see you in person. And I actually want to piggyback off of one of the things that you discussed a little bit in the in-person interview, which is the kind of concept of positivity. And I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on that and maybe give us like 3 concrete ways that you would try to bring joy or positivity to our students' experiences at the middle school.
Maybe having some students, events, sponsored events. And what I love is like when you talk to kids, sometimes they have ideas about what they want to do. And I think them being able to feel that they have a voice could be something very important. Like I'll give an example. I had one young lady who came to me one time and said she has an issue with what's happening in the cafeteria. And she feels that we're wasting food, we're wasting materials. She needed to do something about that. So we sat and I said, well, why don't you work on a plan and then share with me? So she came back, she had devised the plan, and she came into my office. She went on the board. She told me her whole plan of how to do recycling. And I said, well, let's go. We're going to put this into practice. So then she met with one of and I spoke to one of the teachers who was already doing something that was very similar. And so she met with that science teachers, and they devised a whole plan and how to have a recycling program going at the school. She was so happy, and she brought her friends in on it. And then so that's how, and kids feel good about that kind of stuff. You'd be surprised how happy they are. Other events that could be fun. So maybe having a student-teacher game, where students actually play against the teachers in some type of an event. So participating in different things with them. I noticed that we already have a garden, and maybe spending times with them there, with some of the students there, could also be a way to get them interested, get to meet students who are interested in different things. Some of the things that I know that students love again is actually, I love to have their work. I love them to share their work with me, and I would have their work on all my walls or things that they say. Like I'll give you an example of like we do something like dig the walls for a teacher or student work, period. Like if they do an artwork that's really nice, they would share it, and I would love to post that. And when they come into my room and they see that, or something they did while I was working in a classroom, they didn't expect that I took seriously. And they walk into my room and it's sitting right there, in my office, and they're like, "Oh, Mr. Charles, you kept that from when I was in 5th grade or 6th grade or whatever it is." Other concrete events that I could think of would be other than them creating, we could sponsor events for them as well. That would be something that is in the line of what they like or that they are interested in. Or maybe having an activity, let's say they can earn something. We can earn, let's say, like a movie night or a movie event or something that is of interest to them. And sometimes just serving them to see what they would like, and then maybe provide that activity for them once they come, like a quick survey that we send to the kids. What would you like to do? What are you guys interested in? And then and say, well, at the end of this week, if we have this and we have that, it could be something tied to attendance. And we can say something like, oh my God, this week we had, 95% of the students came to school on time. So if you could reach 97%, we're going to have this event. But it will be an event that they like, something that they've enjoyed. So something like that.
Thank you. So we have just have a few more minutes. I realize my error in scheduling 20 minutes, but we'll extend it a little bit.
It can be for both as well.
Okay. So the question is, have you worked with restorative justice? That's from a teacher.
Yes, absolutely, I have. And this is why I talk about BBIS so much, and also with giving students opportunities, to fix things and to make things right. Yeah, and I think it's the best program, if you ask me. And that's why I don't focus so much on consequence, but just opportunity to make things right.
All right. Mr. Duffy, I'll let you go next.
Hi, Hillary. It's nice to see you again.
Mr. Duffy got a shout out. He saw your garden.
Okay.
He did hit the garden club today. So yeah. So my question: when you have someone stepping into a new leadership role in a school building, it's a really good opportunity to kind of to bring in your outside knowledge and really kind of take a reflective look at what the school's doing. And with that, comes change. And very often change is, people are reluctant to it on all sides, whether it be families, whether it be teachers, whether it be, the central office administration. So, how would you go about implementing a large change that might be unpopular with one of those populations?
I think it's really buy-in. You have to try to get buy-in, and then we have to do it in a way where maybe people have to vote on it, and whether they want to do it, and then agree that if we vote and we agree on something, that we're going to go for it. A lot of times you're not going to get full buy-in from everybody, and I know that. But if we can agree to disagree, but if we're going to try something, we're going to try it fully. And I think that, to me, that is the approach, to actually get changes, because anytime you bring changes, you'll have some pushback, and for whatever the reason is. But giving the people the opportunity to share their thoughts, why agree or disagree, but also figuring out a way to come to a consensus. And once we've reached consensus, I think then we can move on and agree to actually support that consensus.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. There's one more question in the chat. I'm wondering why Watertown, why this community, and what particular strengths and experiences will you bring with you?
The why Watertown is, I don't know if there's a why. Watertown is such a beautiful place. I always thought of that before going there. I've driven to Watertown several times and heard about Watertown, but being at the school today was just like, oh, wow. You guys have a great community there, and it really is attractive. And I think just my visit there makes me so much want to be a part of this endeavor. And one of the sort of strengths and experiences, boy, I think I have a vast story of experience in a number of areas. I've been lucky to have been exposed to I've been exposed to ELL. I've also been exposed or worked with students with SIFE. I've done this for a number of years, and I have done so much in education that has given me a lot of experience. I've worked with curriculum in terms of figuring out how to choose curriculum, how to implement curriculums. I've had opportunities to do that. And also pedagogy. I think I've spent so much time teaching that pedagogy is definitely a strength. How to support students in their learning using different modalities, and also how to engage students in classrooms. It's something that I really think is extremely important. How to engage students into learning. and the different things that you could use to do that. And that's an aspect of pedagogy, of course. And I would also say, yeah, I mean, that community is very attractive. It is very attractive. I really had a great experience this afternoon, and it's something that I'll remember for a while.
Thank you. All right, so any words in closing, or anybody have one last quick question, or? All right. All right, Mr. Charles, it was great to see you again. It was a nice afternoon. Thank you very much. And I'll be in touch soon.
Oh, thank you very much. I had a very pleasant time. Have a wonderful evening, and nice to meet each and every single one of you.
Thank you. Take care.
Lovely to meet you. Good night.
Good night.
All right, thank you. So Susan Carl is here. I'm going to let her in a moment. I just put in the chat the link for the feedback form for parents and caregivers. Like I said, teachers and WMS staff members, I will send it out on WMS General. So sort of two different surveys, basically actually the exact same survey, but just so I get a sense of how everybody in the community is feeling. And I will send that out to everybody as well, because I know people will be watching the recording of this. So everybody can get a chance to give feedback. So I'm going to let Ms. Carl in.
Hi, good
Hi.
afternoon.
Hi, Susan. How are you? Nice to see you.
Oh, nice to see all of you. How are you?
Good. How was the trip?
Smooth. I didn't have any delays, so it was great.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I'm glad you could join us tonight. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at the school. So what we're doing tonight is we have a mixture of parents and caregivers and teachers with us tonight. So if we have 20, 25 minutes. So if you want to give us a few minutes sort of introduction to yourself. Oh, by the way, this is being recorded. I just want you to know, because a lot of people couldn't make it. So I'm going to put it out so people can watch it later after the soccer games and everything are over. So if you just a few minutes sort of introduction to yourself, your background, sort of, why you want to come to Watertown, and then we'll give everyone a chance to ask you some questions.
Sounds good.
All right. Okay.
So I'm Susan Carl. I'm from Medford. I'm in my childhood bedroom right now. And I grew up always like wanting and working with children, right? And so when I went to Tufts University down the street, I felt it was pretty natural for me to end up in child development. And I was really inspired by the child development intro teacher, professor there, who is pretty well known for her work in dyslexia, Dr. Wolf. And but she always wanted to work with the intro level, right? And so from there, I was just inspired by her commitment to education from the very beginning, right? Getting educators excited about learning and about how learning works. And so from there, it was just a natural progression to becoming a teacher. I worked in Boston Public Schools for a while. I also worked for Boston College for a little bit as a health teacher, which was so much fun. But also I bring it up because it instilled my passion for social emotional learning, which is a huge part of what I do now in Chicago as an assistant principal at a middle school there. So I went from teaching there, second and third grade level, and then went through a leadership program and ended up in this role, and I couldn't have enjoyed it more. I was able to join with the current principal, so we started as a team there, and we were entering a system or a school that had established protocols and processes that I wasn't really used to. They were doing things more traditionally. Our out of school suspension rate was astronomical. And so we really, from day one, focused on culture and climate and just making school a place that people wanted to be, not just the kids, but the staff, the families, the community, everybody. And so I'm really proud to say that, like, on our what's called the 5 Essentials survey, we've grown to where we're in the green now instead of the red. We've gone up to a level 1. I know Chicago is a little bit different, but we were just really proud about the work that we did, because we knew that in order for kids to be academically successful, they needed to feel safe, and they needed to feel welcome, and they needed to feel like people cared about them. And that's a large part about what I do every single day. That hasn't stopped. But that's what I am so excited about doing in Watertown. I know that there's a huge commitment, not only to social emotional learning and academics, rigorous academics, but to how we get there and how we get there in an equitable way. So that is why Watertown is so exciting to me. And one of the reasons I'm really happy to be here with you all tonight, because I couldn't go to a district that didn't put that or make that a priority. Sorry, I'm shaking. My computer's shaking on the bed. This is so embarrassing.
I think we're all used to it by now. People who Zoom from the rocking chair makes me nauseous, right. Things like that, yes. All right, so parents and caregivers, do we have any questions to start with? Or anybody else? All right, let's see. I'm looking.
Can I go?
Yes, I'm sorry. I couldn't tell if I saw your hand, Kelly. Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm Kelly Spillane. I'm a literacy coach at the middle school. Welcome. It's nice to meet you. To what you said about kind of like revamping the culture and climate for not just students but staff. What kind of professional development did you work with for staff to have that kind of a shift happen with suspension rates and things like that? So can you speak a little bit more about the professional development and then what you did with actual, like the kid work? Like what did that look like? Thanks.
Sure. So for professional development, we started out, we do like a week 0. That's what we have. So before kids get there, we did a lot of professional development around identity and who we were as people and getting to connect the staff. So they could feel more of a sense of community that was really lacking from what we had learned in initial interviews and surveys, just meeting the teachers before we even, started the work. My principal was there for 3 months before I got there. So I joined her in September. She was there at the tail end of the previous principal. So she also had a sense of the culture. So we were able to integrate some of the work that we have as a district. So there was some work around social emotional learning and what that was, but largely was around identity and some bias work, although we've done a lot more of that now, more explicitly, I think. A lot of the work came from the National Equity Project, but we did not have them come. It was through a restorative practices coach that we had that we also worked with within the district from a community organization that we were able to acquire because we had achieved a sizable grant, which was really, really nice. And so we spent a lot of that time just coming together as a staff because we knew that we couldn't do the work, right, if the staff didn't trust each other, and the staff at that point was pretty isolated within their classrooms. Oh, this is probably annoying, so shaky. So we did a lot of that work in that first year. We talked a lot about what it means to be a restorative practices school, and what does it look like and how does it differ from the previous experience. So what was happening was anytime there was disruptive behaviors, the office was being called, kids were being asked to leave the classroom, kids were getting suspended left and right, as I mentioned. And it was also often inequitable. We noticed that a lot of the Black male students were the ones that were receiving the more punitive punishments, particularly suspensions. So we had to do a lot of work around what does it mean to send someone to the office, what kind of behaviors go to the office, what kind of behaviors should you be able to handle in your classroom, but also more preventatively, how can we set up routines and procedures in our classroom so we can be consistent in how we respond to what's happening, but also just to set up like very high expectations for how we behave in a classroom so we can all learn and do our best learning. But that has since grown even more where we became a restorative practices school. So that came with a lot of professional development. Our dean became our director of climate and culture. And so he led a lot of that. Particularly important to us was making sure we were reflecting what we were asking the teachers to do. So all staff meetings always have a check-in. That has now evolved to doing something called the Brain Smart Start, which comes from the work of conscious discipline, which is another approach to prevention, essentially rooted in brain science. And so I've led a lot of that professional development in the last 2 years. We're in our year 2 of the pilot, and teaching teachers what the brain science is behind that. And so in turn, the kids have now started to learn, okay, when I get in trouble, I'm not gonna like get sent home. A teacher is gonna talk to me, or a teacher is gonna come mediate a conversation with me, or I might go to Miss Carl and have a conversation with her. And instead of me asking what's happening, I'm going to call your parents. We talk about what happened. We talk about why it happened and what maybe we can do to repair the harm. That may include a restorative conversation with the other student or staff. We've actually had this staff to staff as well, which has been interesting but fun. And I guess fun's not the right word, but moving on, we were then able to then involve parents, letting them know like this has shifted a lot in how we're approaching discipline, so that when we have a phone call to a parent, we can say, hey, this is what we've done already. This is what we're going to do. And if it doesn't work, this is what we're going to do next. And this is how we're going to check in with you. What else? I mean, we do so much around this kind of work. And now like we do things even like the kids know when they're in the hallway, they just have to wear this green lanyard. And so now the interaction in the hallway is not like, hey, where are you going? It's, hey, how are you? Because we know that the green lanyard means they're going to the office or they're going to the bathroom, whatever that might be, right? And so now we also have an SEL period. It's 30 minutes every day with their homeroom. And that's where they learn explicit SEL skills with our own sort of like cut and pasted curriculum. We use elements from Second Step. We use our own ideas and then stuff from restorative practices like peace circles. So every Wednesday, there is that expectation that homerooms are holding peace circles with their class, or talking circles. It doesn't necessarily have to be a restorative conversation. It could just be community building, and that's what they're doing every day. So, and we continue to do that. My work now has led into more explicitly about equity and what that looks like, so that we can actually be more responsible and responsive to the behaviors that are happening in our room, and understand why, not only, and I think combined with that work about the brain, understanding how we can reflect on ourselves, so that we can better understand the experiences of our families and our kids, and so that we create a safer and just like a calmer environment in general.
Thank you. Sorry, my son's friend was honking his horn. Yes, Holly, go ahead.
Hi, I'm one of the world language teachers. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Everything that you said really resonated with me. And I don't want to make assumptions around identity, but if you are comfortable with how you identify, because I am not a person of color, but I am the family liaison for Spanish-speaking families.
Okay.
So how does that play into your role with this restorative justice work, with the what was happening with the Black boys being, overly disciplined and over-identified? I hope I'm not being offensive with this.
No, not at all. I've, as I'm sure everyone has, particularly this year in light of recent events, right? But I think over the last 5 years, just being really reflective about who I am, where I come from, the privileges that I have as a white woman working in a predominantly Latinx school, and knowing the obstacles that may or may not create, but that doesn't stop me from getting and engaging with my families, right? So you were asking about how I support teachers or students when they're faced in more explicit situations. I'm sure there's more implicit things happening all the time, and we're working to understand and combat. But we have students who are identifying as non-binary at my school. We have teachers who are identifying as non-binaries. We're working really hard to create an even more supportive environment. So I know we had hoped to start a GSA this year, and it's slowly getting off the ground. We're doing it with teachers by doing a book study. And then the teacher will be starting that in the fall. But also just giving students more voice. We had a student council, but they were doing very small things, maybe once a month, right? So they might be putting like post-it notes of like, you rock, or you're cool, like around on lockers, which was great and really helped give the kids more authority over like how they support each other, right? But they still weren't having as much of a voice on what was actually happening at the school level. So we're creating this school voice committee. Right now it's called the Student Planning Committee, because their only task right now is to help us find an event that's going to engage everyone that are both hybrid and remote, so in person and remote, for an end of school activity. So we're trying to create a place where the students have more advocacy for themselves, but also a place where students not only identify who they are, but accept others, right? So a lot of that work is just starting to percolate. We're starting to see more and more students like coming and joining these teams, and not necessarily what you would consider your traditional student leader. And so we were able to have students nominate one another to be part of this committee. So yeah, I think to answer the question, in order to help create this environment, it's creating those structures and the opportunities for kids to support each other, as well as the teachers having those uncomfortable conversations when necessary, and really being very explicit about data and what the data is reflecting and how we're going to have to work harder, because it's just not acceptable.
Could I ask a follow-up, Ms. Martin, or do we need to clear the airway?
Oh, sorry. Yes, you can ask a brief follow-up and then Kara's next.
So based on what you just said about data informing what's happening, we do have a lack of a diverse teaching staff working with our students. So I'm particularly interested in how that rate of suspension came down. You talked a lot about the things that were happening. Could you give some specific examples of how that then manifested itself in the classroom with these overly represented students of color?
Sure. So I will say the students of color are a very small percentage, so it was even more outrageous, I guess, for lack of a better word, that this was happening. Was so obvious. There were teachers that we would have one-on-one conversations with when we noticed particular patterns of behavior. So that was one explicit route. We also just did data analysis. There hadn't been a lot of data analysis done, and I think it was a real awakening for some teachers to see what the data was reflecting. And that's why that equity work was so important, because they didn't even recognize the own biases that they had within them, I believe, and were able to come together and talk about that more freely. I mean, we're definitely still getting there, right? Being able to talk about uncomfortable situations. My staff is relatively diverse, but it doesn't necessarily reflect all of our students. We're getting there, but we have had to have a lot of difficult conversations about what you're asking, right? And so I have to attribute a lot of the work, though, to our commitment to the climate and culture. And if you didn't like it, you weren't comfortable, and we have had staff members leave because they wanted something to follow, like, okay, here's one infraction, the student did this, infraction 2, students to the office, infraction 3, student gets suspended. They wanted that very explicit protocol. And I think, as you all know, as parents and as educators, a lot of times that kind of a lot of that is so situational, and a lot of that can be handled just with a conversation, and it doesn't need to get so punitive. So I can't say that there was one thing. It was all of this working in conjunction with one another to help lower that rate. And to be fair, that rate was very, very high. I think due to the transition, they were just using suspension as a means to avoid dealing with what was at the root of a lot of those problems. And so just right away, by coming in with a new, fresh approach and really focusing on that climate and culture, on the procedures, on the protocols, and what does this look like, we were able to lower it almost immediately to a more average, and then continually lower to where we are now.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I hope I answered your question.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Kara.
Hi, I'm Kara Lopez. I'm a parent at the middle school. So I'll ask the same question that I'm asking everybody, and that's, what if you joined us at Watertown Middle School, what would you do? What would be your approach to kind of onboard and get to know the community, get to know the parents and the caregivers, engage us? and as well as obviously the students?
Sure. I think a lot of that is just like being naturally myself, which is just, being around and being present, right? So I know you already have some active parent groups, PTO and the site council and those things that are happening. So being at those meetings, that's the only way not the only way, that's one way in which I'm going to get to meet people in one capacity. And maybe that is the way in which they're engaging. And so that's the only meaning I might see somebody, right? I might see other parents at arrival. I might see other parents at drop off. So just those informal settings are a huge part of how I get to know the community and engage with them. But then there's also those more formal events like, I don't know, middle school dances or whatever you guys already have going on. I would love to just build on that and do things that make sense for your community. I'm a huge runner, so maybe I'll bring a 5K. But I mean, I'm getting in the weeds. But I mean, the part that I'm excited about is being able to get to know all of the parents in whatever way is accessible for them. So it might be through Zoom, it might be, on the playground, or it might be through an email or a telephone call. Whatever makes sense for that family is what I aim to do. And if I can't, I always follow through. So you email me, I don't get back to you, I get back to you in 24 hours. Or you call, you leave a message, you call again, you don't get me because hopefully I'm in a classroom somewhere working with your kids. Because that's what I'm really excited about is to meet the kids in the classroom and see how they work with each other, how they get along, and see how I can best support them and support your teachers. So yeah, I think I guess I don't have a prepared answer because that part seems really easy to me, right? Just like getting to know you and wherever you might be and pop around. So yeah, Watertown seems, I mean, I'm in Medford. I grew up knowing it. I mean, not well, we didn't play you guys in sports, so I didn't know you that well. But from what I know about the community, it's one that is about community. I mean, this meeting says it all. You guys are all here. You're willing to meet me and get to know me and see who I am. And I want to do the same for you and your children.
Thank you. Lily, I think you were next.
Thank you.
So I'm going to also ask the question that I've been asking, which is, so hi, I'm Lily Reed. I have a rising sixth grader, and I'm also a member of the Watertown School Committee.
Okay.
So my big question is, it's been a really challenging year for both staff and students. I was just hoping that you could give us 3 concrete ways that you would bring joy to the beginning of this new school year.
I love that question. Yeah, it's been an extraordinary year for sure. I think the best way to bring joy though is to figure out, and again, I need to get to know your kids, but to figure out what they like to do. And so a small thing, and I know you're asking for concrete things, so I'm trying to think, but one thing that my kids love is anything competitive. So whether it's a Kahoot, if we're still, utilizing, all of our teachers have gotten so amazing at technology that they probably know something even better than Kahoot at this point. But that's one small thing, but maybe there is some sort of competitive aspect, and I don't want to get, I want to figure out what the kids want and what makes them joyous. I don't know your students, and I can't presume to, but I do know how to figure it out. So another way to bring joy is all this SEL that I've been talking about and feel so strongly about, and that's a lot of just community building. See, there we go. The cat's trying to come in. Yep. So a lot of community building events, and I would really just love to build on whatever you guys have there that works for you and makes sense for you. And so to me, that means I don't know, my kids love ice cream. And so we might have an ice cream night, but maybe we'll do a getting to know you, maybe do a Zoom with me, or I don't know, whatever. It's hard to say because I don't know them. So concrete is tough. But yeah, I think those community building events are so important, and they're really fun, and anything outside I know middle schoolers love. So that's what we've been focusing on. So even though we're technically in Chicago have had to be really, really careful, I know you guys have 3 feet, we've had to do 6 feet. And so even with gym, it's been really interesting. And so we're getting them outside as much as we can because that seems a little bit more normal. And so I think in the coming year, normal is going to be really joyous. And so anything we do on top of that is going to be really exciting for the kids and hopefully for you parents as well. Maybe we'll utilize you guys in whatever this competition is I'm coming up with.
Thank you. Diego, I see your, yep, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm a parent of a 5th grader and an 8th grader. So one exiting the middle school, one coming in.
Oh, lots of transition.
So the same question I asked before is, this has been a very atypical year and so many fronts, anywhere from pandemic to social justice to all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
So what have you learned this year that, it presented all sorts of opportunities to learn new things that hopefully we can carry forward. So what's that for you?
I think it's a really great question as well. I've learned to slow down. We needed to make school in a non-normal way feel as normal as possible. And so on the teacher end, we've had to slow down a bit. Like our meetings that were typically, an hour and a half after school became an hour, right? So things like that. But also just in terms of like how we interact with our kids, how we set expectations. It doesn't mean that we lower them. It just means that it might take us a little longer to get there. And that's because we're dealing with all the things that you're talking about. There has been so much unrest, particularly in Chicago, I mean, everywhere, but in Chicago, especially. And in the community that I'm working with, our families had to deal with a lot. We were one of the highest, the highest rates of COVID positivity. And so my kids are coming back to school with even more trauma than they had experienced before. And there's a lot of healing to be done. So while I haven't learned that per se, I know that is going to be the utmost priority when they return in the fall. And that is not to say Watertown has not dealt with their own trauma. For sure, everyone is going through so many different things, so many different experiences this year. And so for me, it's sitting back, it's listening to my community, what they need, listening to the kids, listening to the staff. The staff have been through so much this year and have had to adjust so much. I know like my staff has had a really hard time because the kids could use avatars. They didn't have to be on video. And so they've been teaching to a classroom full of avatars. And so, and that's why I say it's just, I've learned to be humble and I've learned to lead with grace, I think more so than I had in the past. This year has been a humbling one for sure. And it's just to take things slow. I mean, you only got one life, right? And we got to enjoy it. We got to get our kids ready. We got to get our kids ready for high school. We got to get our 5th graders ready for 6th grade. And we're doing that. We are absolutely doing that. We're still setting them up to be successful. We're getting them to know what high school is like. We're bringing in, representatives from our high schools. And we're, next, I think it's, on the 9th, we have our virtual tour of Northwest Middle School, right? We want to make it normal, but we want to be compassionate at the same time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. I have one last question in the chat, unless anybody has a different question. So just in the last couple minutes, can you tell us about your approach for collaborating with your school principal? How do you, meaning me, how do you envision collaborating? How do you envision collaborating with Ms. Martin and other staff within WPS?
Sure. Well, I think I mentioned earlier, one of the things I've really learned how to do is to collaborate. I imagine that you and I would meet a lot with our instructional leadership team and or, other administration in Watertown, but really working closely on what our goals are, using that SIP to help guide our work, but then making sure that we have distributive leadership or utilizing the different committees that we have, the different grade level teams, the different departments, so that we're making sure that all of our decisions are in the name of success for kids. So, and that means being really, really careful about looking at data, looking at our subgroups, looking at our EL students, looking at our disadvantaged students, looking at our cluster kids. How are we still providing rigorous learning, no matter what their subgroup puts them in, right? So using that data to help guide our work. But yeah, look forward to collaborating with you. That's, I think, how I do my best work. I like to think, and I like to think out loud, but I also like to use details and processes and structures to make things have that arch, right? So we're figuring it out, we're learning about it, we're testing it out, we're looking at the data, we're reflecting on it, and we're talking about it. But there is that loop of, let's also make sure we're communicating not just with the teachers and not just with the students, but with our stakeholders. They're just as invested in the success of our school as anyone. And I really enjoy work. I think I do my best work with other people as opposed to just working in isolation. And so I see myself as an instructional leader with you, but also really being deferential at the beginning, because you know the school way better than I do at this point. And so it would be really, really important to get to know you on a personal level as well as, in a professional capacity. But yeah, my favorite work is working with teams and particularly when people are excited about the work, and that's how I am. So it's fun.
All right, thank you. That sounds great. So I don't know, you want to take a minute for some closing remarks, and then I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank you all for being here tonight, whether you had soccer practice or not. I know how important Watertown Middle School means to you, and how important it is, because they're only there for 3 years, right? We lose a third of those kids every single year. And so it's really important that we make those 3 years as impactful and meaningful as possible. We make that transition from elementary smooth, and that transition to high school smooth. And I've had a lot of years of experience doing this in Chicago, and I am beyond excited to get home and be closer to family and be in a community that's excited about the work that we're doing at the middle school level. Middle school is cool. They're a cool group of kids. There's nothing like them. So it's exciting to have that opportunity and to use my experience in Chicago here. So yeah.
All right, terrific. Thank you very much. I appreciated you zooming in, or flying in and then zooming in for this.
Of course.
And
yeah,
then
I'm ready to see you guys tomorrow.
Yep, absolutely. You get to meet the real live children.
Can't wait.
Teachers.
Right. I'll bring my mask. Don't worry.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you,
right.
Susan.
Thank you all.
Take
Have
care.
a good night. Be safe. Okay, I'm leaving now.
Okay, thank you for the great questions. I'm going to let in Mr. Chen, and that will conclude our interviews tonight. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Principal Martin. How are you?
I'm well. How are you? It's nice to see you again.
Same here. Thank you for inviting me back.
Of course, of course. Thank you for your patience in the waiting room. Of course, I didn't allow quite enough time, but I appreciate your patience. So we have a mixture of parents, caregivers, teachers here. Really looking forward to meeting you and hearing from you. So we'll probably start with, if you want to tell us a few minutes, give everyone a little background about yourself, sort of where you're coming from and what you've been doing recently. And by the way, congratulations. I should have had you in your cap and gown. Congratulations on your graduation today.
Thank you so much.
That must have felt great. Yes, that was excellent. So yes, very good. That's quite an accomplishment. That's always a good feeling to have that done. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, so a little bit of background about yourself, and then we'll just open it up to questions from everybody.
I appreciate that. Okay, self-introduction. My name is Ki. My last name is Chen. If you say my name really fast, it sounds like kitchen or keychain. I always introduce myself that way so people can remember my name, which has always been difficult for me. So a little bit about myself. I was born in China. Both my parents were professional athletes. My mother was a provincial champion in ping pong, and my father was a world champion in weightlifting. However, when I was in school, the only class I failed was PE. Anyways, despite being very accomplished in their fields, we all struggled financially growing up. So when it came time for me to choose a major in college, I decided to study finance, and with a specific goal of pursuing a career as an investment banker. However, that plan changed for me in senior year of college after I learned about the achievement gap in the United States, mainly millions of children, much like myself when I was growing up, did not have access to a high quality education simply because of their background, their socioeconomic status, and so on and so forth. So I felt that was my call to action. So after college, I decided to spend a couple years teaching in a high need school. And what was supposed to be a 2-year commitment with an organization called Teach for America turned out to be a decade-long journey that took me to many different places in the United States as well as China. Over the past 12 years, I've served in many different capacities in the education field. So for example, I taught in the United States as well as China at a high school level and at elementary school level. I've provided training and support to middle school teachers as well as elementary school teachers over the course of a couple of years. I've also served as managing director of an NGO in China, where I led a region of about 100 teachers at over 30 schools. And as Principal Martin mentioned just a little bit earlier, this past year, I was a graduate student at Harvard's Ed School. Today was my graduation. And my daughter, I think, was more excited about it than I was because Elmo was there. So that was great. Besides that, this year to prepare for a school admin role, I was also a principal intern at a school in Cambridge. And I'm very, very grateful for the fact that you guys are all here. And I would love to take any questions you may have so that you get to know a little bit more about me. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have anybody want to ask their question? Everybody's being shy right now. All right, I'll ask one of the questions from the chat, which is, you probably can't see it, but one of the questions is, can you tell us about your approach for collaborating? So this is from a parent, not for me. Tell us about your approach for collaborating with your school principal, mainly me. How do you envision collaborating with Ms. Martin and other staff within WPS?
So as the assistant principal, I believe my primary responsibility is to assist Principal Martin in fostering a positive and safe learning and working environment for all students as well as for all faculty and staff. With this in mind, I believe there are a few different, I think there are many things that I need to do in order to make sure that my collaboration with Principal Martin as well as the school community is successful. The first part really has to do with building relationship and building trust. I think coming into this role, it's critical that I understand the needs of the students, the teachers, and the staff. I also want to make sure that I understand the direction in which where we're going. So that's the first part. I think the second part is really having an alignment. And what I mean by that is having a shared agenda in terms of where we're going. Making sure that we are clear on the specific goals and objectives of the school. Making sure that I understand the initiatives being implemented at the school level. And if I don't understand anything, that I ask questions. And the third part is really grounding our conversation in students' achievement as well as objective evidence. So I think these are just some of the approaches that I would take to ensure my collaboration with Principal Martin as well as the rest of the school community is successful. I don't think this was mentioned in the question, but I believe hugely in working with families and also working with the larger Watertown community. And if that question comes up later, I'm happy to address it.
Thank you. It may come up later. Have you worked at all with restorative justice?
In previous schools, restorative justice was not how we approach student discipline. Unfortunately, that was not how, that was not the case. However, I think my personal belief on behavior management and also just on working with students who perhaps are distracted in class or have behavior issues is this. I believe behavior is a function of their environment, and to ensure that students behave appropriately or in a way that is conducive to their learning, we need to improve the environment. I think there are a few different ways that we can go about this, and this is aligned with, I believe, Watertown Middle School's current approach, which I read about in the students' handbooks. The first one is really focused on prevention, making sure that behavior problems don't come up in the first place. And there are many things that I believe we can do as a school community to prevent unwanted behavior. So for example, building relationships with students, having a trusting relationship. So when an issue comes up, the student is willing to talk to a teacher or talk to an adult about it. Another thing is setting up routines and structures, both academically and non-academically. So for example, having very clear routines for students entering, exiting the classroom, having structures inside the classroom for distributing assignments and different things that happens in the classroom to create a structure for the students so they know what to expect throughout the entire class and throughout the entire school day, creates a sense of safety. And having natural consequences to redirect students' behavior. So for example, if a student is talking in class, the teacher may walk up to the student simply to let him or her know that to stop talking and then pay attention to the classroom. So these are just some of my thoughts on how to work with students if their behavior, their actions are not conducive to their learning.
All right, thank you. Anyone want to jump in? Oh, so go ahead, Laura.
I'm wondering if you could give some specific examples about how you build relationships with students outside of disciplinary, interactions with them.
Thank you so much for that question. When I first began teaching, my school was the second worst performing school in the state of Hawaii. Less than 9% of the students were proficient in math. Despite my early efforts inside the classroom to invest students in their learning, it wasn't as successful as I wanted to be. So I turned to school's data. And what I learned was that more than 80% of my students played a sport, a school sport. So what I did after that finding was I attended their athletic events, football games, basketball games, volleyball games, so on and so forth. And over there, I was able to cheer for my students, and they saw that I was, interested in something that was important to them. And while at these games, I was also able to meet parents, meet families, build relationship that way. And shortly after I began going to my students' games, I saw a huge difference in my students' behavior. So for example, they show up to class more often. They pay attention throughout the entire lesson. And then after my second year at my school, and this is along with other efforts I did, we were able to improve our school's math scores significantly to the point that it was being recognized by the Department of Education as the most improved school in the entire state. And besides that, I also love to surf, and being Hawaii, a lot of my students did too. So I saw a lot of them at the beach, and I would catch waves with them. And if I may share, I don't know if we have time, if I may share an artifact with you. It's a student survey that they filled out for me in the most recent school year prior to the current one. I think that will give you a good idea of how students felt about me. Is that okay with you, Principal Martin?
Sure,
For just a couple minutes?
Sure, go ahead.
If you can give me, I guess,
sorry.
privileges.
Sorry. It's always on lockdown. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see this?
Thumbs up.
Okay, so this is at my school, Kohala High School, for the 2019 to 2020 school year. And for me, it's a survey that students fill out every single year. And these are just the summaries. I want to go over them briefly. So for example, the first one is school climate. And my overall feedback, my result was 89%, compared to about 70 to 71% at the school level, the district level, as well as at the state level. Moving down, in terms of classroom engagement, I was at 78%. And this is compared to in the 40s at the school level, at the district level, and then at the state level. And moving down, in terms of classroom rigor and also classroom teacher relationship, I was in the mid to high 80s, where at the school and the district was in the 60 to 70s. And then finally, for pedagogical effectiveness, my students very generously gave me 99% approval compared to the state, compared to the school, the district, and the state, which is in the low 70s. So I just want to share that with you briefly.
Thank you.
I'll stop sharing.
That's a cool survey. I'll have to ask you more about that. Thank you. Kara, do you want to ask your question? Okay.
Hi, I'm Kara Lopez. I'm a parent of a middle school student. And so my question is, as a parent, how would you, if you came to Watertown Middle School, get to know us as the caregiver community and engage with us?
Thank you so much. Parent engagement has been huge throughout my career as an educator. If I can just share with you some of the things I've done in the past. As a teacher, I call parents on a daily basis. Before I would make 2 phone calls every single day between I would say the second and the third period when I have a 20-minute break, to just give a brief update on how 2 students, they were doing in the classroom. And most of the time, they're very, very positive. And parents were at first surprised, but they got used to receiving that feedback. So that's number one. Number two, when I was first teaching, I made regular home visits as long as parents felt comfortable. Some of the parents, they really didn't because they were homeless. So they didn't feel comfortable having me visiting them. But for any family who were willing, I made home visits so that I get to know students in a place where they, they feel comfortable, they feel like it's their turf. And earlier I mentioned that I went to athletic events. I went to every single one of my students' games. I cheer for our students alongside parents and families. When I was in China, I walked, when I was in China, I spent about 7 years in very rural parts. And most of the students, they lived on campus and they went home over the weekend just because it's a very long walk, sometimes like 4 hours one way on foot. So I will walk with the teachers as well as the students, over this long journey. And during that time, I will get to know the students very, very well. And then as well as once I get there, speak to the families, and get to know them too. So these are just some of the things I've done in the past. And in a professional capacity, I've served in many different roles outside of teaching. So for example, I was a special educator for 3 years. So I was in IEP meetings all the time, meeting with families, talking to parents. I was also an ELO coordinator. So for the students whose first language is not or was not English, I got to communicate with those parents too. So these are just some of the things I did in the past. But I think it's extremely important. It's one of the reasons why I decided to apply to Watertown Middle School, because I saw in its plans that working with families is a priority for the school.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So there's a question in the chat from a teacher, but I think the parents also want to know. I'm wondering why Watertown, why this community, and what particular strengths and experiences will you bring with you?
I cannot see the chat.
No, I know. I'm sorry. It's from here. I'll copy and paste it. One moment. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start answering. So thank you so much for that question. I think the why questions are super important. When I was applying to school admin positions, there was, yeah, there were many different things that I was looking for. The first one is that there is a need at the school. I don't know if you, I guess, see my experiences or looked at my resume. Everything I've done over the past 12 years, has served a community, has served a group in need. So I wanted to make sure wherever I went, I could be helpful. So the first part is, I think I'm just like talking too much right now. Okay. So the first part is there is a need. When I was looking at the school's data over the past 3 years the most recent 3 years MCAS from 2017 to 2019. And what I noticed was that about half of the students were proficient in reading as well as math. And I believe my background as an effective teacher and also as an instructional coach could contribute to the school's effort to improve its efficacy. So that's number one. The second part has to do with diversity. That's hugely important to me. When I was looking at the school's demographic, I saw a shift over the past 5 years. So for example, just pull up data real quick. So over the past 5 years, I noticed several things. So for example, the percentage of Hispanic students increased. The percentage of students come from economic disadvantaged background also increased from 2017 to 2021. I believe, hold on, let me just take a step. I don't think I answered that second part too well. So the first part is on need. The second part is on diversity. Diversity is important to me because I personally have many different identities. I want to make sure that in this capacity, I can serve the students. I can relate to the students in some way, in one way or another. So for example, I identify as a person of color, and Watertown Middle School has a student population that's about a third who are students of color. I also identify as a person who grew up in poverty, and that's a demographic that Watertown Middle School serves. And I also identify as an English language learner. And over the past, I think, several years, this has been an increased demographic at the school too. The third part really has to do with community. I touched up on that a little bit earlier when Kara asked me the question on how to connect with families as well as students. The fourth part is a focus on students' safety. And I would love to talk about that a little bit more as far as why I decided to become a school administrator. The fifth part has to do with a focus on data. I have a background in finance, and I would say I'm a fairly objective person. And I would say using data to identify problems and finding solutions is a strength of mine. And I'm happy to touch on that too, if that question comes up later.
All right, thank you. Diego, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. So I was wondering, this year has been a very atypical year for many reasons: social justice, pandemic. It's hopefully not the typical year that we'll see for students, teachers, and families. I'm curious, like, what have you learned from this year? Like, things that maybe you can apply on more normal years. Like, I think it'll be interesting to hear.
Thank you so much for that question. And also, by the way, I just noticed you have a Chinese name next to your Zoom name.
I do. We are a mutt of a family, so that is my given Chinese name. Yes.
Okay. So your question was on what have I learned in this year? Oh my God, I've learned so many different things. Where do I start? I'll say the first thing that I learned is that schools are so much more than just a spot on a map. I believe it is a community, and it is important to involve families. It is important to involve community organizations as well as NGOs. Over the course of the internship in this past year, I saw parents and families really working as co-teachers to support their students' learning. Continue with that point on the importance of involving many other stakeholders in this process is communities. So over the course of the past year, in every assessment that we distributed to the students, we saw, certain groups of students have experienced learning losses, but we also saw community organizations coming to support the students. So for example, in Cambridge, where I'm doing my internship, there is a community organization called Cambridge School Volunteers. And what they have is, professionals or students volunteering their time to tutor students one-on-one or in small groups. So that's the first lesson that I learned. Schools are not just a spot on the map. I would say the second thing that I learned is that schools provide so much more than just academics, especially if a school serves students with high needs. Many of the students, they receive 1 or 2 meals a day at a school. For students who receive health services, 75% of them receive them at a school. So when the pandemic hit, a lot of them did not have access to food. A lot of them did not have access to health services that many of them relied on. I would say the third thing that I learned throughout this experience is that school communities are incredibly resilient and adaptive. The teachers that I work with, many of them overnight have to learn how to teach online. I've watched my wife, who's a middle school teacher, having to teach in-person students as well as online students simultaneously. And just have a huge amount of admiration for the work that they do. So these are just some of the lessons I've learned over the past year. But thank you so much for that question.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I don't know if anybody has other questions, or Key, if you have any closing remarks for us. And then I'm excited to meet you tomorrow in person and get to meet the students and teachers and Dr. Galdston.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to meet you guys in person. So we have a few minutes left. And when I was speaking with a professor yesterday, she shared a quote from Mark Twain saying that, 2 of the most important days in in a person's life are, number 1, the day that you are born, and the second day is the day that you find out, or when you know your why. So I'd like to take the next, a few minutes to share with you my why I decided to make the shift from a classroom teacher to a school administrator. So I decided to become a school administrator in 2018, right before Christmas, after a student of mine committed suicide. In the days and weeks after the tragedy, I was looking for answers, if there's in any way that we could have prevented this tragedy from happening. And I poured into the schools and the district's data, and what I found really shocked me. So for 6 years straight prior to the student's death, our school was going in the wrong direction. If you look at the school climate survey report, you'll see that in 2012, over 80% of the students felt safe and well on campus. And in 2018, only about half of the students felt safe and well on campus. And then I looked into the teachers' data too, and I saw a similar trend. In 2012, over 90% of the teachers felt safe and well on campus. And then come 2018, the year of the tragedy, less than half of the teachers felt safe and well at the school. So as a school, had we recognized these dangerous trends and took serious action to address them, I believe that child will still be here with us today. So it was then that I decided to pursue a career as a school administrator. I believe it's an incredibly important job, not only to elevate students' learning academically, but also have the ability to create a school environment where everyone feels safe and well. So this is just, I just want to share that bit with you so you know why I am, making a shift from being a teacher to a school administrator. I think I'm a teacher at heart. When I first began teaching, I thought I would stay in the classroom forever. But again, I felt that was my call to action, and I want to make sure that I can do something to make sure that every single student and every single teacher feels safe, when they're in school. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story with us. So personal, we appreciate it. So sorry for your loss of a student. That's very hard. It's very difficult. All right, so I think we've come to the end now. It was great to hear from you. And I really am looking forward to tomorrow.
Same here.
In person. And I hope you have a nice night.
Thank you so much for spending your evening with me. And I look forward to meeting some of you and hopefully all of you tomorrow in person.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Thank you, Key. Have a nice night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I will put the survey in the chat again in case you missed it for parents and caregivers and faculty and staff. I will send it through WMS General. Sorry, I'm just doing this. And thank you. We had some great stories tonight. Good information. Anybody have any thoughts or questions or anything?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, I had to keep muting myself because I had a roving band of children with Nerf guns on my street. They're constantly out, so they're adorable. So except for when my lawnmower goes over the things, it's not great. But okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and I'll see.
Decisions being made. Do you know the timeline of? I
I
know
would
the
think-
interview tomorrow, but
Yeah, probably right at the beginning of next week. I'll see the other two candidates tomorrow. I need to call references, and it's a Memorial Day weekend, unfortunately, but people are usually pretty good about getting back. So I'll be doing that over the next, tomorrow morning and then over the weekend as much as possible. And, Tuesday. And so I'm hoping by right at the beginning of next week, as soon as possible, make a final decision, consult with Dr. Galston as well. So she has the final say, but we'll have a lot of say as well. So I appreciate you all participating and asking great questions.
Thanks, Donna.
Thanks,
Sarah.
Donna.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Diego. Diego, we did unbelievable work last night. We missed you, but we.
I know. Just yesterday just got away from me.
Yes. No, I figured
So-
everybody was at the building meeting, but so what I'm going to do is we got a bunch of the objectives or initiatives out, and we're going to fill in, and then I'll send the draft to everybody, and we can decide how it looks if we want to meet again or what we want to do. So, but I took all the information that you all gave me, so it's all in there.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you.
Very good.
Have a
Thank
nice
you.
night, everyone. Bye-bye.